He's starting with chapter 11 of A Night Divided. Just a quick reminder to have your annotation sheet nearby and to take great annotations, otherwise known as notes, while you are reading. And we've already modeled for you many times how to do this, so you're on your own, flying solo on that. So definitely take the initiative. First 10 chapters were a whirlwind of events. Some of the most important are that a wall went up in Berlin overnight, put up by the communist government, and it divided families and friends and neighbors. And in particular, Goethe and her mother and Fritz, her older brother, are stuck in East Germany on one side of the wall, while her father and her brother Dominic are on the other side of the wall. Goethe's best friend Anna, she has an older brother named Peter who tried to escape from from East Berlin to West Berlin in a car. He tried to sneak in a secret panel in the car, but they were caught, and Peter was killed. Anna's family blames Goethe and her family because Goethe's older brother Fritz knew about the escape beforehand. Fritz was interrogated by the Stasi, the secret police, and we've just learned that the Stasi has a file on Fritz and Goethe, which is a terrible thing because it means that they are suspicious of them, and then they are going to be kept from many things that would be, commonplace over here. They won't be able to attend university. They won't be able to get good jobs when they get older. So it really is a problem. Let's dive right in. I mean, there's many more events, but those are some of the main ones. Let's dive right into the story here by reading the quote at the beginning. Wherever they burn books, they will also, in the end, burn human beings. So this is talking about how, communist governments and governments with dictators, they tend to have a tight control over information before they get to things that are even more dangerous. So this was a quote by Heinrich Heine, who is a very famous German poet. Okay, let's jump in. Over a week later, Anna still wasn't speaking to me. She blames us for what Peter did, I said to Fritz as we walked to school. It's like we're not even friends anymore. You're not, Fritz spoke sharply at first, then drew in a deeper breath. Just be patient, Goethe. Their family is in a lot of trouble. But that's not my fault. You don't know what it's like to face the Stasi. Even after a week, he hesitated before naming them, and I wondered if the bruise they'd given him was nothing compared to the other wounds that maybe couldn't be seen. Anna understands it now. If they told her to avoid our family, then that's what she's going to do. It's her only choice, really. If they told you to avoid me, would you? I asked him. Fritz just chuckled and rubbed my head. Avoid you? Top of page 69 is where we are. Don't be silly. You and Mama are the only reasons I'm still here. I laughed along with him, but not really. I knew a part of him had meant exactly what he said. In the days since coming back from the Stasi, something about Fritz had changed. He was working fewer hours, or maybe not even working at all. I wasn't sure. He blamed his mood on the rainy spring weather, but I felt certain there was more to it. He was spending more evenings at the youth clubs, playing table tennis, and had gone to the theater on a couple of nights with his friends, even though he admitted the movies weren't much for entertainment. I did notice him combing his hair more carefully before he went out. Maybe he had a girlfriend. I hope she liked moodiness, because that was also part of the new Fritz. Okay. So I like Goethe's sense of humor there. And then I also wanted to mention, it says that Fritz isn't very interested in the movies. And remember, are the movies censored over there in East Germany? Does the government control what can be shown and what cannot? Absolutely. Since I didn't have Anna for company, and since I figured making friends with anyone else would just infect them too, I took up reading and went through books so quickly that the librarian said she wondered if I would end up reading all the books the library contained. I doubted that. I made it a point to avoid the books that sounded too preachy. Remember, the government puts forth a lot of books that give propaganda. They put propaganda into it, which is basically, misinformation to try to make the West seem bad and the East seem good. Avoided the books that sounded too preachy, although I did check them out now and then in case the Stasi wanted to add my book choices to their secret files. And there weren't many books I really wanted to read anyway. A lot of shelves that had once been filled were empty now, because books make, top of page 70, because books make people think. The GDR, this is the acronym for the name of the government, wanted to be sure it was their kind of thinking. Mama seemed to like the idea of me reading, since she knew I would be safe at home while she was at work. And she definitely liked Fritz doing more with his friends. She thought it meant we would eventually become more settled into our lives here. Mama still didn't know anything about the files. Both Fritz and I had decided that wouldn't do her any good. Nor did she understand that I had too much of my father in me to ever be settled in my life here. I was so much like him, in fact, that I hoped he would understand why I avoided the route to and from school that would take me past the platform. I figured if the Stasi were watching us, the worst thing was for them to see my father up there dancing out the lyrics to a song while I tried to figure out what it meant. Okay, that was another huge event from the past several chapters, is that Gerta saw her father and Dominic at a couple points on the other side of the wall. Her father tried to communicate with her, as what Gerta feels was happening, through dancing to the lyrics of a song that they used to sing together when he would tuck her in at night. So she's trying to figure out the meaning of his dance. I wasn't even sure if I wanted to figure it out. Whatever secret he buried before he left, I doubted it was worth the risk of digging it up. Our family didn't need any more trouble, and that was all we'd get if I did understand his dance. By mid-May, the whispers of summer were growing. School would be out soon. We'd have time to run and play like children should, and the weather was becoming so perfect that it felt like torture to be inside. Which was exactly my attitude late one afternoon as the temperature in the apartment became unbearably warm. I had opened the windows, and the breeze was perfect enough, top of page 71, perfect enough that I put on my shoes to go outside. Mama didn't like me to wander alone on the streets while she was gone, but this was the middle of the day. I felt perfectly safe. I had just finished buckling up my shoes when I heard a scuffle going on in Herr Krause's apartment next door. He wasn't alone. Something was wrong. Through the thin walls of our apartments, I heard him cry out for help, and I darted into the hallway. I wasn't exactly sure what I should do, but there were always people down on the street. Perhaps I could run downstairs and bring someone back to help him. He cried out again, and then something crashed against the door. "Hold on," I yelled. "I'll get the police." His door opened, and Herr Krause collapsed onto the floor in the hallway. His head was bleeding, and he was groaning. Two men followed him through the doorway and grabbed him by the shoulders. "We are the police," one of them snarled at me. "Go back inside." No, they were Stasi. So what's the difference between just the police and the Stasi? Yeah, they're the secret police, right? Except for they work for the GDR. They're communist. Their greenish-gray uniforms and the square and compass emblem on their hats were dead giveaways to their identity. The question was why they had come for our neighbor. What has he done? The question fell from my mouth before I could think better of it. Surely they had made a mistake. Herr Krause wouldn't swat a fly without feeling guilt. In other words, Herr Krause was a very kind man. But they began dragging him away without answering. All right, and this would be an example of an idiom, right? We're using this comparison saying that Herr Krause wouldn't swat a fly. That's a figure of speech that tells us that he's a kind man. He wouldn't hurt anyone. Okay, top of page 72. Two more Stasi left his apartment next. The smaller of them pushed past me to clear the way for his companion, who was carrying an armful of books, papers, and what appeared to be rubber stamps. It was a child's playset. I used to have one just like it, in fact, so I couldn't think of any reason Herr Krause should have it or why the Stasi would be interested if he did, unless it wasn't being used for play. A gust of wind came from my open apartment door and blew into the hallway. It caught a few papers from the officer's hands and scattered them on the ground. Without thinking, I reached down to help pick them up. Sure enough, the printing on them was stamped with a message that looked as if it had been hand-carved into the stamp. If I cannot speak what I think, then it's a crime just to be me. Despite its promises of a free press, the state controlled all printing machines and wrote the stories for the newspapers to publish. No citizen was allowed to write his own ideas if they differed from the state message. And certainly it was against the law to distribute those writings. Okay, make an inference here. So we know that one of the papers has the statement on it. And this statement is a form of peaceful protest. This is a protest against the government censoring their freedom of speech, censoring information and limiting their freedom of speech. So what has Herr Krause been doing? What has he been using this child's play set, this little stamp set for? Yeah, he's probably putting these things on leaflets and to prepare them for distribution to others. So yeah, he's in a lot of trouble here with the Stasi. But that's exactly what Herr Krause had done. He had carved a political message into children's toy stamps, and in so doing had risked years of imprisonment. From what I knew of Stasi prisons, there would be no public trial, and he, top of page 73, and he would have no opportunity to defend himself. His interrogators would stop at nothing before he signed a confession for whatever crimes they decided he had committed. In effect, Herr Krause's life was already over. "Give me that paper," the shorter officer ordered me. Something about him seemed familiar, though I couldn't quite place him. "Let her read it," Herr Krause shouted from the end of the hallway. "Why is the GDR so afraid of letting its people think?" But the officer shoved me against the wall, and in the moment when our eyes met, I whispered, "I know you." He was a friend of Fritz's, or used to be, years ago. When I was very young, he used to ride me around on his back like a pony. Didn't he remember that? Didn't he know me too? He reached for the paper, but for some reason I clutched it to my chest. He raised a hand and slapped me hard across the cheek. I gasped as it knocked the breath from me too. Then someone shouted, "That's my sister! Please stop!" Suddenly Fritz was at my side. He apologized to the officers, then grabbed the paper from my hand. When Fritz went to give it to the officer holding me, his eyes widened. "Victor?" That was his name. I remembered it now. Victor clearly recognized my brother too, but in an instant his expression hardened again, and his grip on my shoulder tightened. Top of page 74. Fritz reached out a hand to me, but Victor wasn't loosening his hold. I shuddered inside. Was I going to be arrested too? Fritz's voice remained calm. "Victor, let her go, for the sake of our friendship." "Finish with the girl and come," Victor's companion called. After a final squeeze on my shoulder, he shoved me toward Fritz and said, "The Stasi have no friends. You'll be joining us soon. You'll find out." Once they left, Fritz hauled me into our apartment and locked the door behind us. "What were you thinking?" he yelled. "I heard Herr Krause calling for help. Printing a paper can't be such a bad crime, is it?" "It's not up to us to determine his crimes or to help him." Fritz slumped onto the couch, closed his eyes, and massaged his temples as if a sudden headache had come on. In a quieter voice, he said, "Victor and I used to be friends. He was a good guy once." I sat beside Fritz, feeling as exhausted as he looked. "Is that what'll happen to you after you go to the military?" Fritz only sat up and stared blankly back at me. "Yes, I think it's exactly what will happen." Okay, that's the end of chapter 11. Let's get right to chapter 12. The quote at the beginning is an old German proverb. "Do not rejoice in luck. Do not hesitate in the storm." Okay. Fritz and I agreed we shouldn't tell Mama about Herr Krause's arrest and the trouble I'd nearly gotten into there. She seemed happier lately, and neither of us wanted to ruin it for her. "We're in a routine again," Mama often said at dinner. "That is good." But the routine was starting to wear on me, and something about reading the stamped message from Herr Krause made me want to see my father again. It seemed like something Papa would have said if he were here. The next morning, I looked for him as I approached the crowded platform. It was a Saturday, only a half day of school for us, but my least favorite day to walk there because of the Western tourists who often came to the wall on the weekends. They took pictures, brought their binoculars, and stared into our world as if we either needed or wanted, top of page 76, as if we needed or wanted their pity. I hated that they watched helplessly but did nothing for us. Then I stopped, as if I had just seen myself in a mirror for the very first time. Who was I to complain about them? Wasn't I guilty of the same thing? Of staring helplessly and doing nothing about my own problems? The tourists couldn't do anything for me. Not even the powerful governments of the West could break through what they called the Iron Curtain. Okay, so that border that divides East Germany from West Germany. And actually, they use this term to describe the border between the East and the West in general, not just in Germany, but in the whole world, right? More and more countries in the East were becoming communist, and the Western world was known for its freedom and value of liberty. So a really strong divide between the two, and that border between East and West became known as the Iron Curtain. And everyone inside East Germany with any sort of influence stood shoulder to shoulder with Russia. No, there was only one person who could change my situation: me. A couple of Grenzers were patrolling the wall this morning, but I didn't have their attention yet. Remember, if you haven't written it down yet, you should have noted that Grenzers are who? The border police. It's short for Grenzentruppen. Nor did I care. I knew down to my toes that my father would be on the platform, and I wanted to see him. I didn't at first. But then as I kept walking forward, Dominic pushed to the front of the crowd and pointed to me. He gave a whoop I thought I could hear from where He gave a whoop I thought I could hear from where I stood, and then called down. Almost instantly, my father was on the platform too. He started into his dance with the digging, but the platform was far too crowded. And he didn't need to do it. I understood what he wanted, just not where. So I counted out 3 long and deliberate paces. Then, with only a peek his way, I knelt on the ground and drew a small X. Okay, so she's trying to communicate back to her father, right? She knows that he wants her to dig. She just doesn't know where or why or what the purpose is. Okay, top of page 11. X marks the spot. My father nodded back at me, and I hoped he understood what I wanted to know. The problem was, even if he did, how could he possibly communicate to me something as complicated as where I should be digging or what sort of treasure I might be looking for? It had been risky enough for me to draw the X, and though I quickly brushed it out with my foot afterward, I still drew the attention of a couple of guards in the tower, who shouted down for me to walk on. I quickly obeyed and hurried away with my heart pounding. But it wasn't from fear. It was excitement for what my father might do next. Only a few days later, I found out. On most school days, our teacher allowed us some time in the afternoon to quietly study with one another. And since it was near the end of the school year, there were some important tests coming up, so she gave us more study time than usual. Although Anna had successfully avoided being anywhere near me for weeks, this time the teacher assigned her to join my group. And the only spare seat was right next to me. I glanced sideways at her, but she did a good job of pretending not to notice. "Anna," I whispered, "can we talk?" She answered by raising the book in front of her face so that no one, especially me, could see her. Top of page 78. A sour-faced boy across from us snorted. "Since when did she become too good for the rest of us?" I kicked him in the shins, hard. When he started to complain, I slouched like I was preparing to kick him again, and I would have, if necessary. From the corner of my eye, I noticed Anna lower her book just a little, and I was pretty sure I caught the barest hint of a smile. Nearing the end of group time, we were discussing the causes of America's Great Depression when Anna silently slipped a folded paper into my hand. All school kids know how to secretly pass notes, but this one surprised me. I wanted to thank her. No, I wanted to grab her shoulders and pull her into the tightest hug ever, but I didn't do either. Instead, I slipped the note between the pages of my folder and began counting the minutes until school ended. Once we were dismissed, I quickly found a quiet spot under a tree, and only then did I dare to unfold the paper. At first, what I saw made no sense. It was just a pencil drawing of an old building. Square and made entirely of brick, there were two long windows in the front, but with no glass in them except for jagged pieces in the corners. An old chimney ran up the side of the building, but the bricks were shaded darker, suggesting it was an addition to the original place. There were 3 ground-level window openings, too, but no door, so I might have been looking at the back of the building. That frustrated me. As hard as it would be to find any building, top of page 79, as hard as it would be to find any building in East Berlin, it would be nearly impossible to see the backs of them without wandering from yard to yard. Anna couldn't draw a circle, much less a building, so I knew this hadn't come from her. But there was no letter, no artist's signature, and no explanation of why I should have received it. Anna walked past me a minute later. I stuffed the picture into my folder and then caught up to her. "Nothing's changed," she said. "Please, go away." I will. I will in a minute. Just tell me about that picture." "I don't know anything about it." But she had to know something. So I touched her arm and said, "Please, Anna, then I'll leave." She stopped and I saw tears in her eyes. She looked around us and then, in a voice so low I barely heard it, said, "We have family in West Berlin. Someone told them about Peter's death and they sent us a letter of consolation. This picture was in that letter with your first name on it, but I don't know why or where it came from." It was from my father. I was sure of that. And while I was less certain, I thought Dominic might have done the drawing. He used to be artistic, though I had no way of knowing if he still was. I started to tell her so, but she shook her head to cut me off and said, "Don't say anything else, please. You don't want me to know why you got that." Top of page 80. "I don't even know." She started to leave, but I added, "Anna, I want us to be friends." I thought I saw her soften just for a minute. Then her face became stone again until I barely recognized her. Okay, we've got a figure of speech right here too. Then her face became stone. Okay, so what figure of speech compares two unlike things, but not using the words like or as? Yeah, this is a metaphor. It's comparing her face to a stone, but we're not using like or as. So good metaphor there. Her face became stone again until I barely recognized her as the girl I had once known so well. "I hid the picture before my parents saw it," she said, "but you and I both know it means something. I can't do any more favors for you, Goethe. Next time, I will tell someone." I backed away to let her leave. If she suddenly pulled a mask from her face revealing a Stasi officer in disguise, I wouldn't have been any more surprised than I already was, because that's who it felt like I was talking to. And who knew? Maybe I was. I looked at the drawing one more time before setting off for home. Well, not directly home. Somewhere in East Berlin, this building was waiting for me. I needed to find it, and that's where I would dig. Ooh, exciting stuff here. Okay, chapter 13 begins with a quote from Albert Einstein. "In the middle of difficulty lies opportunity." So he was actually a German physicist and intellectual, in case you didn't know that. In the middle of difficulty lies opportunity. 3 days of searching turned up nothing. So many places came close, but something was always different from the picture. It had the wrong type of roof, or different windows, or no chimney at all. Oh, I keep forgetting too to remind you, be taking great annotations. Stop when you need to and take a note. It seemed like everything built since the war looked alike, and the building in the drawing appeared older than that. About a half-mile east of my school was a street of older homes, but I didn't see the one from the drawing among them. I was beginning to wonder if this building really existed, at least in East Berlin. The 4th day was another Saturday, a week since I had last seen Papa. Mama sent me to school with a loaf of bread to give to Anna's family. It wasn't much, but it was all we had to spare. And Mama wouldn't have dared offer more anyway. Anna's family was still being shamed for what Peter, top of 82, still being shamed for what Peter had done. Mama didn't want it to look like our families were that close. But Anna wasn't in school that day, and the teacher said she had complained the day before of not feeling well. So I decided to deliver the bread on my way home that afternoon. At least it gave me the opportunity to walk a different neighborhood of Berlin, and a part of me hoped that as her sorrows healed, so would our friendship. Anna met me at the door, and although she looked as healthy as anyone else, I didn't question her. If I could get away with faking sickness to skip school, I'd do it every day and not feel a hint of guilt. Before Anna slammed the door, I shoved the loaf of bread at her. "This is from my mother," I said lamely. "She thought your family might want it." She didn't seem too enthusiastic about accepting it, and though I wanted to believe the Stasi couldn't find anything wrong with my mother's simple gift, I wasn't that naive. Not anymore. But whether she wanted it or not, the bread was in Anna's hands now, and the only way she could refuse it would be to drop it on the floor or hurl it back at me. If she did, I wouldn't have much cared. All Mama had asked was that I give her the bread, not force her to keep it. Finally, Anna mumbled, "Thank you." She started to close the door, but I put a foot in the jamb to block it. "I'm sorry Peter's gone, but you shouldn't be ashamed of what he tried to do." Though I hadn't planned to say that, top of page 83, the words poured out of me. The thoughts had swirled in my head for so long, it was a relief to speak them, and at least I was careful to keep my voice low. He wanted a better life, a free life. You can't blame him for that, or at least I don't. "We have a good life here," Anna said. "Why wasn't it enough for him?" I explained it to her the way Fritz explained it to me long ago. "You've seen the sun, Anna. Now that you have, could you ever be content with just the stars for light? Would that be enough for you?" Anna bit her lip, and her eyes darted both ways along the hallway. If anyone had been there, she'd already have shut her door on me. When she was sure that we were alone, she whispered, "The night he tried escaping, Peter left a letter for us on his bed. The Stasi have it now, but his roommate at the university found it first and told us what it said. The final line was, 'If I don't stand for freedom, then I must sit in chains.' Is that what you believe too, Goethe?" Of course I did. We were in chains, even if she couldn't see them. I spent 6 days a week in a school that taught me freedom was a lie, and every minute in public pretending I believed it. She knew the consequences for speaking out just as I did. Why else was Herr Kraus arrested? And there was the wall.
Jake Smart, please come to
Got
the
an interruption
office.
here.
Jake Smart.
And there was the wall. If life was so terrible beyond it, then why force us to stay here? But I couldn't say any of this to her, not anymore. Top of page 84. Anna seemed to already have the answer for her question. Her gaze hardened.
Bailey, please come
Oh
to
dear.
the office. Anne Bailey.
Her gaze hardened. I told my parents the real people in chains are those who break our laws. They must know they're going to be caught sooner or later. Suddenly, our simple conversation began to sound like an accusation. I wasn't sure why. As far as I knew, I wasn't breaking any laws. None of the big ones, anyway. A door opened down the hallway, and I turned to see who was coming. In that instant, Anna slammed her door shut, and I became a disease again. Okay, once again, we're comparing two unlike things. Goethe's comparing herself to a disease. But are we using the words like or as? Nope. So what kind of comparison is this? Yeah, this kind of figure of speech is once again a metaphor. I marched from her apartment with a few unkind phrases in mind that I wished I had said while I had the chance. She was practically quoting the state's propaganda, no better than a puppet on their string. Besides, I had only brought bread, not smuggled goods or revolutionary pamphlets. No secret messages were baked inside, and we asked for nothing in return. It was only bread, and yet she had treated me like I'd brought the plague. No, she believed something worse, that wherever I went, the Stasi would eventually follow. That was a ridiculous idea, wasn't it? I decided to take a shortcut home, which sent me down a narrow alley that I usually avoided because of the leftover rubble from the bombings at the end of the last war. But this time, all I wanted was to get home and slam my bedroom, top of page 85, my bedroom door behind me and try to forget I had ever been friends with Anna. Except where I should have turned back onto the main road, I looked farther down the alley and saw it led to the back of some other older buildings. I'd never been on this abandoned street before, yet it still felt familiar. Walking faster to keep pace with my racing heartbeat, I took in the details of one particular building. It was old and square and made of brick and looked like it would crumble if hit by a strong enough wind. Two long windows ran up the back, and a chimney going up the side was made of a darker colored brick. The three square windows at ground level were boarded up, and once I left the alley, it was easy to see why. All right, what has she discovered? The building now served as part of the Berlin Wall. Tall cinder block rows butted up directly against the old building, and the barbed wire emerged from the wall all the way up and over the top of the building. I could only assume the front of the building was inside the death strip and that it was sealed up too. So remember, the death strip is that space between the wall in East Germany and West Germany. Okay. It's heavily guarded. They have explosives. It has mines and things that usually has some guard dogs, like lots of dangerous stuff there. So hence the name, the death strip. Two more old buildings connected in a row to the building in front of me. Then the wall continued on from there. The ground where I now stood looked like a small patch of forgotten farmland. It was infested with weeds, some that were almost as tall as me. Halfway to the road, a deep irrigation ditch supplied a small pond. Top of page 86. Far to the left and behind the wall was a watchtower, which I knew from all my previous observations was always staffed with grenzers, who constantly looked out for anyone getting too near the wall. But they'd need binoculars to see me well, and there didn't appear to be a border zone here, or at least nothing was marked to keep us away from the wall, and the tire tracks from the Grenzer patrols didn't look too recent. My eyes flicked back to the building in front of me as my heart pounded with possibilities. This was the place my father had wanted me to find, and something was buried inside it. I didn't know what, but the first chance I got to return with Mama's shovel, I intended to find out. All right, we're getting to exciting stuff here. So that's the end of chapter 13. Take your time to write some great notes. Now would be a good time to stop and take notes and to summarize the most important events. All right.